add the breath. And even though you're on mute, give it some sound. Ah. So just kind of gather yourself, call your energy in so that you can be more fully present for this deep and exciting transmission today. So we're gonna take a few breaths with eyes closed, and you can continue to move with your eyes closed, just finding where's the greatest alignment for flow and ease. See if there's any subtle shifts that will support a more open divining rod, like your body's an antenna. And what does it need for more conductivity? And soften the exhalation.
I still have to pack my stuff and all kinds of stuff, but yeah.
So we're softening the breath, following the exhale down into the pelvic bowl. And take a moment of gratitude towards the earth and all the earthbound guardians, all the allies and support from below. And allowing that support to lift you up. Breathing through the heart up to and beyond the crown. Find the natural rhythm of your breath as you ascend into the cosmos. Feeling gratitude for the skyward guardians and allies. Allow yourself to open to the entourage of help that's available from beyond. And lastly, bringing your hands to your own body, to your, maybe your heart, to your sex center, to wherever your hands want to anchor in to the wisdom within. Gently breathing and unfolding. Feeling the portal open to the vast guidance that comes from within. And a few more breaths to invoke and invite all muses and inspirations that are equal to or higher than our collective vibration as a creative coven. Allow your antennas to bond and connect with all the unseen forces that are supporting your book. Deep, big breath from the heart. Opening your eyes when you're ready. So welcome. This week is actually kind of a monumental milestone. We're making a transition from pre-writing into writing now. And so I've called week 5, Write Like the Wind. And the kind of roadmap of where we'll be going is to start off by, let's see, we're going to make this big transition, and it is a different kind of realm. It's almost even in a different part of the brain. And so we're going to start off by really like diving into, and it's a strategic review of the 5-minute chunk, but we're going to get firmly clear on what is the basis, the building block of our book, which is these, we're calling them chunks. And then we're gonna, like I said, another part of the brain, we're gonna go into math. A lot of writers aren't always, super excited about doing math, but this is writer's math. So we'll have a formula to target our weekly page goal and page count, so that everybody on the call, as part of the homework, will be really clear on how many pages or how many words they're going to be writing this week. And then we have a contract. So it's an outrageous love declaration, writing declaration. I look at it like a soul contract. And so Michael's going to read that for us before we wrap up. But the thing I'd like to start with first is a writing exercise, so that we can all be on the same page about what a writing chunk is. So we're going to go into that in a moment, and what that's going to ask of you in order to be ready for this exercise is I don't know if you have your computer or what form your blueprint is in right now. All I need from chapter 1 of your book is one question, which, whether it's the very first one or just one of the questions in the blueprint, it doesn't matter. But if you look at your chapter 1, and it's one of the questions that then has 3 power words, for those who, didn't do a blueprint, or who, changed their book around or anything, I have a default kind of that I'll give to everyone, so you can do a 5-minute writing exercise on this default question. But first I want to say this, because we have been conditioned by our schooling and our classes to often be like, okay, in terms of grades, am I passing? Am I failing? Where am I? And I want you to let go of comparing yourself to anyone else, first of all. But second of all, let go of even the self-assessment of how you did on your blueprint, because the last weeks that we've spent working on this process have been absolutely like what you needed. It's like a perfect preparation. And if you actually don't have don't have anything to show for it, you've got a rough brainstorm and that's all you've got, that's fine. Because many writers don't even work off of an outline, and some of them just an outline. Most writers don't do blueprints. So today is the day we start writing with or without a blueprint. And what's important and kind of painful and a little uncomfortable is if you started a blueprint, you're loving it, and you're like, I just need more time to finish it, I'm going to say stop. You have to start writing now. And after you get your writing done and you're really on track for writing, then you can spend your extra time blueprinting if you choose. So it's important to literally like go into a different part of the brain. So I'm taking my time to talk about that, and hopefully what you're doing is finding one question, the first question in your blueprint. So if you can pull up your blueprint, find one question, don't judge which one, don't overthink it, just the first question you can find that has 3 power words. Now, for those of you that don't have a blueprint, what you're gonna do is ask, what is the problem that chapter 1 solves? Okay, so if you have a concept of what your first chapter of your book is, maybe you've got the title of it, you want to turn that problem into a statement, turn that statement into a question, take a moment and visualize 3 words that best describe the answer to that question, because that's how you create your 3 power words. And now we're going to do 5-minute writing where you're going to write as fast as you can. Before I give you the instructions on the writing, does anyone have any questions about what we're doing, where we're at? Good. So everybody's able to write for five minutes? I don't see any hands up with opposition, so we're going to go ahead. And we are, in a moment, going to take a breath. You're going to visualize, and it's almost as if one of these guides or guardians came in and gave you the perfect answer to the question. That's the kind of visualization that you do in that one breath before your pen is out or your fingers are ready. And you then start with one of the power words. So you're using one power word. You can adjust it as needed, which is like you can change it to, the power word is pound. It could be pounding or pounded, change the word to fit the sentence the way you want it to flow, but just start writing from, pounding rain on the windowsill, and then just keep going nonstop, no thinking, 5 minutes, including then the other 2 power words as soon as you can. And as you're writing, you're answering that question. So it's not just free association. It's like you're actually trying to, in the 5 minutes, creatively fulfill and colorfully fulfill that question. When I say stop, it's going to be a complete stop. Okay, are we ready? I'm going to pause the recording, but if you're watching this in the future, pause the recording and actually do the timing as well. All right, everyone take a deep breath. And begin. Okay, so in theory, all you would need to do is 15 5-minute chunks in order to finish chapter 1. So what's wonderful about the blueprint is it actually breaks something like a chapter into many deadlines, and deadlines are magical. So do you remember when you were, maybe if you went to college, but when you had a term paper assigned, and maybe the professor gave you 2 months to do the term paper, and it's like, okay, you're supposed to be researching, you're supposed to be, doing this critical thinking, and you couldn't get yourself to write, couldn't get yourself to start it, or maybe you kind of kicked it around, but it wasn't until the night before that you're like, oh shit, I've got a term paper due, or, the weekend before, and you like tear into the books and you turn off your distractions and you pour into the pages, and then like somehow by the seat of your pants, you pull together a term paper with, like 24 or 48 hours of writing. That kind of all-nighter energy is what comes through when there's a deadline. And if you think about it and you're like, wow, I created all that writing in a weekend. When you have an entire, book, what we're doing is making mini deadlines, lots and lots of them. Like this 5-minute deadline pushes your creativity and squeezes it out into that time. And ironically, you know, I used to work with, I'd be like, oh, I'll give myself an hour and I'll work. During that hour, all kinds of distractions come in. But if you break the hour down into 5-minute chunks with a little bit of a transition, you know, between chunks where you read your question and you take a few breaths and you're like, hey, I've got not five, I've got, what is that? It's 10. Yeah, because that's 50 minutes and then you maybe take a 10-minute transitions. So you've got 10 of these chunks that you do in an hour. That means you can finish your, you know, chapter, like in 2 hours, you can finish each chapter. Like, really can write this book in an outrageous speed. So, you know, I see Dave, some people are better at math than others, and Dave's quickly doing the math of like 44 hours to finish my 220-page manuscript. Yes, right? If you're a writing machine and that's all you do, absolutely. We have to, you know, schedule in time for breaks, like, you know, stretch breaks, but also the break where you take a moment to pray, to get into state, to, you know, because we channel, you also have to raise your vibration to match the answer that you're downloading. But that's minor. I mean, you really get to see how quickly you can write your book if you pre-plan and use the blueprint technology. Now, even if you didn't do a blueprint, as I said, you can still use 5-minute deadlines and chunks. And the idea is to think about first, like, what's the most colorful way to answer this piece before you begin, and then begin and stop. So that is the foundation building block of the entire book. And we can do math in terms of how many chunks it's going to take or how long it's going to take us to do those chunks. But the real formula that we'll be using for the rest of the course is your target weekly page count and your target weekly word count, which is the same thing. It's just whether you choose to, you know, call it pages, call it words, whatever motivates you. And the key here is not to overwhelm you, but to empower you. So you'll, you know, it's almost like, you know how statistics are very subjective, like they can do a big study and then the results are often framed in order to make the point they're trying to make. We as writers are going to do this little formula. We're going to break it down in a way that feels good to us, as opposed to feels like, holy shit, that's a lot of writing. Okay. So I want you to get out your calculators, and we are going to start with a simple formula. It sounds like the number of pages that you want your book to be. Okay. Now, we've already talked about how different genres are different sizes. If you want to do a 150-page book, that's the kind of target. The 50,000 word mark is the target of NaNoWriMo. And this is a national write a book in a month movement that says that qualifies as a book, is 50,000 words, you know, or about 150 pages. But the most books out there have different sizes, and I'm going to probably use a 300-page book as an example. You know, I have had students in my class. I had a science fiction writer who wrote a 500-page book during the 90-day period, and she did this math, and you'll see, to write if you're one person in the class might be writing 150 pages. I know there's a cookbook that's likely smaller than, and requires less writing because there's more pictures than the science fiction novel, which was like 500, right? So we had this inequity of sizes. Then what you want to do is you divide it by the number of the book, pages of the book, divided by the number of weeks left, which in our case, we actually have 9 weeks left of this course. So once you do that division, it'll tell you how many pages you have to write per week. So the example is if you had that 500-page book, you would have 55 pages per week. Most, and that's, to contrast, for example, with if you're doing 150 pages, then you have to do 17 pages a week. But most of us are probably closer to 300. And that means we're at the 33 page per week mark. Here's how this formula will work each week. So every single Thursday, you're going to course correct the formula. I have a 300-page book. If I write 33.3 pages, just round it up, right? Or round it down, but you've got 33 pages to write every week. If I stay on target, I never have to do any more math. I don't have to adjust my formula at all. But let's say next week, all I do is 10 pages. I intended to do 33 pages, but I only got 10 pages in. What do I have to do? I take the number of pages left, right? So now it's 290 pages, and I divide that by how many weeks left, which is now 8 weeks. And what do I get, Michael?
36.
Okay, so now I know 36 is my new goal for next week. Let's say my grandma comes into town and I get no writing done because I'm, tending to my family and I get distracted and I'm, just, okay, so now I've lost a week and I have to do the math again. I divide it by, what is it now?
290 by 7.
By 7 weeks left.
And you have to do 41 pages that each week.
Yeah, so then it's like 41 pages. Oh shit, right? And let's say I get super inspired that week and I write and I'm like, cancel all my appointments, all I'm doing is writing. And let's say I write 50 pages that week. Then,
now we have 240 to go and it's 6 weeks. So that's 40. So that drops us down to 40 pages for the rest of the week.
So then I target 40 pages that week and I get to celebrate when I hit my target every week, right? And if I don't hit it, like say I only do 3 pages, I don't want to give up. I don't want to just say, okay, I've got 40 pages and I'm getting 3 pages done. I have to look at it like that's 3 pages and I wouldn't have done. And because there's still 5 weeks left of the class, every week is very precious. We're in this amazing container that will continuously inspire and synergize our work. And by the end of the journey, the intention is to write as absolute much as I can. Usually what happens is these numbers go up and up and up. And guess what? I've had students who on the final week of this writing course have put out just hundreds of pages on the final week. So it's possible. Don't get discouraged, but just keep course correcting. Now, the value of this page count process is so that you again feel motivated, not overwhelmed. So some people, the thought of, like in my case, 33 pages a week sounds like, oh, that sounds like a lot. I feel way more comfortable if I go to word count, right? So daily. So 33 pages a week is divided by 7. How many pages a day?
3 divided by 7. That's 5 pages a day.
Perfect. So then for me, because I'm a daily writer, I'm like, cool, I'm going to get my 5 pages in a day this week. Maybe on a bad week, it's like, I got to get 7 pages in a week, or maybe I'm ahead and it adjusts or whatever. But most people aren't daily writers, so they can't do the divide by 7. It just doesn't make much sense. The writing world typically talks about words. If you're not an author who has worked a lot with words, word count doesn't usually mean as much as pages. But it's worth noting that if you're trying to do 33 if you're trying to do a 300-page book, what's 300 times 250, Michael?
Hold on. 300 times 250.
In fact, everybody,
75,000.
okay, good. Everybody right now take the number of pages that you want your final book and multiply it by 250. Because it is valuable to know, hey, I'm trying to do a 75,000 page book. I had the experience, my book last week, which just launched on Kindle on 52 Fridays, when I wrote it, because by the way, I was doing all kinds of weird math around 52 Fridays. I had 52 chapters to that book, right? I was trying to I blueprinted it, but not to our formula. I still had to adjust. I still blueprinted the damn thing, and it ended up being 90,000 words. Michael, what's 90,000 divided by 250?
90,000 divided by 250 is 360.
Okay, my editors didn't like that. They're like, that book is fat for just erotica. Erotica is usually a light read. And they are like, we need you to cut it down to, it went from 90,000 words to 75,000 words. And that was a fierce rewrite. It was like, ouch, the kind of cutting, especially when it'd be a different thing if it's a book that you could cut certain chapters and leave it for another book. But when the book is called 52 Fridays, because there's 52 chapters and you have to cut massive amounts, that was intense rewriting. And I just wanted to tell you guys that when they told me, okay, we want this book to be 75,000 words instead of 90,000 words, I was like, I can do that. Because I was so eager to be published and also like the challenge of like concision, and I'm sharing that with you with a postscript, because later in the course, I'll share all kinds of tips about how rewriting and cutting actually makes for much better writing. What we'll find in the chunk that you just wrote is that the white hot raw just writing process allows us to flow, but it often ends up being fat or redundant, or there's a lot of fillers in that kind of fast writing, which later there's lots of tips. Now the 5-minute chunks really does reduce the redundancy. If we were to take our time, we end up being a lot more redundant. So it's a great process. Here's what I want you to know about the formula. You can, right now, we're going to put you into a breakout group in which you're going to share with your partner the total amount of your book plus your new weekly target. And so you're supporting each other to make sure everyone's done the math right. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about how to deepen your commitment to this. Now, one way that we commit and are accountable, of course, is our ongoing accountability buddy process. But even just by putting you in this breakout room, and you declaring, this week I'm going to write 33 pages, right? So we've been playing with our blueprints, and if your blueprint is like mine, I think mine right now is 12 pages long. We've been playing for 2 weeks on 12 pages, something like that. And some of us, or 3 weeks, for some of us, it's like, hey, I've got 2 pages of notes, and that's fine. But we're going to make that shift into writing as fast as we can, which again now means I'm producing 33 pages this week. Tell your partner how many pages you're committed to, or and your final word count of your final book. Do we have any questions before we go into breakout rooms? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. I know you mentioned, so my blueprint isn't completed. I've only blueprinted a couple of chapters. You said something about doing the writing before I do any more blueprinting.
Great. Yeah. So the tendency is, I'm in the middle of blueprinting. I want to keep blueprinting. I know. And I want you to use that as your carrot to motivate you. You can continue blueprinting after you get on target. So you have to complete your target writing goal and then do blueprinting.
For
Now,
the day or for the week?
so I'm going to suggest this week, because it's the first week, that you crank out your pages, that you just lay down, crank out your pages. But in the future, what I really, really recommend, what you do, I've got a little bit of feedback, is having your daily page count. So we determined I have to write 5 pages per, great, Dana, one moment, 5 pages per day. I write my 5 pages and then I'm like, whew, I met my target. Now I can take some time to work on my blueprint. But then tomorrow I have to write my 5 pages and then work on my blueprint. But don't work on your blueprint until you've done your target. And for those of you that need the blueprint to write, it's a good balance that way, because otherwise, honestly, from my heart, you could spend the next 9 weeks working on a blueprint. I know many, many authors that have been planning to write books for 10 years. So this is time to get out of the planning and into the flowing. Okay, good. Dana. And then Narkis.
It's Dana here. I'm curious about this math because I feel like I'm going backwards. I have a lot of it already written, and now I'm going back through, like, the exercise we just did was super helpful in making sure that, you know, I'm making my points and I'm clear in my focus for each chapter. But I feel like my homework is actually to do this exercise for each chapter versus maybe the pages. I already have about 120 pages written.
Okay, so if I understand, Dana, you're working on, based on a memoir, based on your journals. Is that you?
Sure. Yeah, it's like self-help and pets.
Okay, hold on though. Somebody else wrote me. That's Jennifer. I'm sorry, Dana. Great. Dana, you're in Guatemala.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Yes, and you're the pet lady. Awesome.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So you've got a bulk of writing already done. How does this formula apply? What I recommend, and this is a perfect example where all of the planning that we've done weeks until now is valuable moving you forward, but not necessary for you to meet your target. So your final word count is what? What's your intended word count?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
My goal pages is 180.
Okay, great. So really, there's a lot of power in having that target. Like, hey, I have an intention to do 180. Why? It's like when somebody sets out to bake a cake and they have no idea what a cake looks like, like they don't know what their cake's gonna look like, it's gonna get messy, right? But if you organize your reality around a 180-page book and you're seeing it and you're feeling it, then what'll happen is, like, at the sub and super conscious levels, the way that you choose what goes into the book and doesn't go into the book has to, organizes itself when you're writing. So if we have a 180-page book and we've already written, because we're an expert in our field, as you are, we've already written 100 and how many pages?
I've written 111.
Great. We've written 111 pages, but we know that that's, a part of the process and not the final draft. Then what we want to do is say, hey, I'm going to be writing this, and you want to kind of take the formula and reverse engineer it, which is about how many, because you know how many chapters you want, how many pages those chapters are going to be approximately each, and you're going to start reverse engineering it. You might be like, in order to do the book the way that I want it at 180 pages and be done with it, I need to write, maybe it's 100 more pages in the next 9 weeks. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, get a sense of how many more pages you want to write, and then do the math of how many pages per week you need to write. And based on what you've already have, some of that's going to go into scraps, right? Some of it's going to be like, hey, that's pre-writing. It's not fully my writing. But some of that, you're going to say, great, I know which chapters those will go into. Now let me write the remaining 100 pages that I need. So your question about, this blueprinting or doing the exercise we just did for every chapter, great, but don't do that until you've done now, Michael, if I'm Dana and I have 100 pages left, how many pages do I have to do in a week? 9 weeks. 100 divided by 9 is
11. That's 11.
Okay, cool. So Dana, you write 11 pages this week, and then you can go back and fart around with your outline.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for being a non-conventional example, because I really want you guys to make this your own, but there's gold in the process. Okay. I saw Narcisse.
Yes. So 2 questions. One is 250 like the standard number of words per page in a book? I guess so, but I just wanted to know why the specific number. Is it always like that in any kind of book?
Yeah, it ranges, because if you go to the bookstore, you see there's different fonts, there's different sizes, but if I'm an editor, say I'm at an agency, or I'm a publisher, the industry standard is 250 pages, so that when I get a manuscript, it's in 12-point font and it's double spaced. That's about what fits on a page. Yeah.
Perfect. And my second question is following also what Dana asked. So I also have a rough draft that I want to expand, and I wonder, what's your opinion if I use these weeks in addition to the pages I want to add, also for rewriting?
Yeah, so I don't recommend you rewrite during the first weeks. It's a very different part of the brain, and we want to access the channeling and the flowing and generating new material. And I'm going to promise you, the gift that you can give yourself, it is so fun to rewrite something that is complete. Like when you have a completed manuscript and you get to roll up your sleeves and be like, now I get to rewrite it. Awesome. But you can't rewrite shit when it's still in your head. And so if you start rewriting partial stuff, there's so many pieces that it's a little bit like, it's crazy making. So if you can put all the clay and a rough draft of down on the wheel, then later when we go into rewriting, you'll be so much happier. You'll be able to work with the entire piece to rewrite it, because you can see the whole picture and you know what needs to be rewritten. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Liana, and then who else had a hand up? Okay, so Liana, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms. Yes.
All right. I just wanted to clarify again. So, because I've got some of my chapters are completed, blueprinted, and some are not at all, especially at the end of the book. I seem to keep doing the beginning over and over again. So you're suggesting actually break the numbers down, the page number per week, the day, do it, and then should I go back and do some blueprinting of the other chapters, or should I just keep writing, or
so
just dump the blueprinting altogether?
Great. So you will know yourself more as a writer after this week of sheer writing. Some of you have an idea that you're a planner, and some of you think you're a pantser, but you need to have the experience of planning a book and actually writing and flowing a book to actually know, oh, this is my style, this is my groove, right? So my last 3 weeks we spent was pre-writing. So the 3 weeks, that's a type of that's a style for writer, and some of us excelled at it, and some of us it was very challenging. The next 9 weeks we're going to spend in writing. That's the flowing part. I want you to have the experience of being a writer who's writing a lot, especially this first week, in order to say, ooh, this is my style. I like being in the flow. This is the easy part for me. It's so much better when I have it planned. I need it planned. Once you know that about yourself, you'll know, do I spend my time writing? Do I spend more time blueprinting? It's going to be what works best for you. So take the week to just write as much as you can and then assess, go, was the blueprint super helpful? Okay, if so, I'm going to do my writing and then blueprint. If not, I'm going to throw my blueprint out the window and just write, because that's how I work best, right? And so I'll be curious to hear how that goes. One of the questions I got from Dana was, how much time do we spend then in the rewriting process? And I will be giving you tips and tools and teachings about rewriting while you're writing, but the bulk of this course, these next 9 weeks, is all about writing. Our intention is to finish our manuscripts, and that's why we're doing this formula on July 15th. The actual deadline until midnight. Some of you will be throwing down the last words and being able to say, I finished my deadline on the actual day that I set. And it happens, it's magic. And some of you on that final, some of you, and this is amazing when it happens. I had a woman, Liz, who wrote, What Color Are Your Stripper Shoes? Was her book. And she actually finished it. We have 9 weeks left. She probably finished it with 2 weeks left. She finished her whole manuscript, and she spent the last 2 weeks rewriting her book. So that's possible too. If you finish your page count before the 9 weeks is done, you have time to start rewriting. But that's not within the, covered within the course. The intention is actually to get you to finish your manuscript first and rewrite later. Good. Okay, so Linda, I'm going to ask you to hold your question because I have a feeling that after we go into our breakout groups and we can try to answer each other's questions, we might come up with questions that we need the class to hear as a result of just checking in briefly with each other. So this is where you get to be accountable for, here's the number of pages I'm intending my book to be, here's my weekly word count, and then making sure that you're both really clear on that, or if you have any questions, you bring it to the group. So the breakout rooms, I'm hoping, because a lot of you are not on videos, if you could turn your videos on. Michael, what's 17? Wait, hold on. Divided by 2 is 8. No, it's 7. I'm out of it. So if it's 16 divided by 2 is 8. Okay. I'm creating breakout rooms. Please put your videos on.
I just sent a note over, Kamala Devi. Please don't add me to a breakout room for this call.
Mm-hmm.
You can just decide not to join when she.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And if someone's alone, you can move him to another room.
Okay, so I'll do that.
What are we doing for how long?
You're talking to your partner about what your word count is and your weekly goal.
Oh, okay.
And it's just for 2 minutes. You're just getting on the same page. Welcome back. Thank you guys for experimenting with our new virtual format. So yeah, I want to just take a question or two before we move on to our outrageous contract. I think Linda posted her question. Yeah.
We're back.
Great. Welcome back. So I'm going to
Yeah.
start.
We didn't get it done.
No problem.
Can you briefly just the formula? We couldn't remember the last part.
Great, Linda. So the target formula, and I'll answer your question as well to the group. The target formula is the number of words, the number, excuse me, of pages that you have left to do, okay? So you take the number of pages you have left to do, which some of you is the entire page count, and then you divide that by the number of weeks we have left, which this week is 9. And that gives you your target page count per week. And Linda's question was, do we start this process with the first chapter or do we just pick where we want to start? And it's a great question because I don't recommend you start with the introduction to your book. I want everyone to know that the introduction to the book is best written when the book is complete. So blueprint the introduction, and you might read that blueprint as you go, but start your book on chapter 1 and move forward progressively is like the healthiest linear, if you're a linear mind, it's the healthiest way to go. Many artists are like, I write where the inspiration takes me. I'm going to feel which chapter I have the most juice for. I have to write 33 pages this week, so I'm going to write it on the easiest chapter. That's fine. Go for it. Where the inspiration is, once you've blueprinted, you can actually, you could pull a question out of a hat and answer it because the blueprint is so like pre-written that you don't need the sequential thinking to do it. It'll be up to you, but I think for the greatest congruency and to minimize the drama or the clusterfuck later, you will, I recommend starting with chapter 1 and going all the way till the end and then wrapping back around and doing your introduction. Yeah, good.
I have a follow-up question on that.
Sure.
And thank you. That was really helpful. One of the things I realized that my intro, which is like a prologue, which is like sort of why we're doing it, explanation, right? Isn't that what an introduction is?
Yep.
And then I realized, though, as I was doing the points, that this book needed more chapters. I needed a few more, but it is including a couple chapters on my journey of awakening. So suddenly my intro is not my intro. It's like, oh, there's an intro, but now it's like, nope, I need to explain to people over actually about 2 or 3 chapters my process.
Great.
That I went through and why I ended up, the end result is and I have also 30 days of something.
Mm-hmm.
But so
the question is,
the intro is just like why you're doing, can you just give me a brief thing for intro? So my brain's going, okay, my intro was my story,
So,
but my story
okay,
now
great.
the first 2 chapters.
So the introduction is always like an arm extended to meet your reader so that your reader has a frame about what they're about to, it's the prelude to the journey you're taking them on.
Like an overview?
Say again?
Like an overview of where the trip we're gonna go on?
It could have an overview in it. It could have here's why I wrote the book. It could have, here's how I got the idea for the book. It could be, here's the benefits you're getting out of it. These are typical things in intros. But, you can customize that. The important thing is the reader is asking themselves, what's in it for me? Why should I even do this journey? And the truth is, the sad, sad truth is that most people pick up a book, off a bookshelf, and they spend 30 seconds looking at the front cover. They turn over the back cover and they spend almost a minute, sometimes 90 seconds looking at the back. They'll look at the table of contents to say, what's in there? And then they might read the introduction to decide whether or not they're going to read it. Introductions are often posted for free now on Amazon. Like Amazon, actually, when you say look inside, it goes to the introduction so people can read it and see if they want to keep reading. So that's how you want to think of your introduction, which is why I consider it something to write last, because it's like marketing material. And you can't very well say, here's what the book's going to be about until you actually know what the book is. So write the damn book, and then you'll know how to frame it and how to seduce people into the door, past the doorway. It's like the decorated doorway.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, so any questions? Does everybody know what their page count is? All right, and everybody knows how many pages they're writing this week. Are you excited? Are you like, wow, that's for some of you the most pages you've ever written, right? But it's totally possible. And I want to support you in being even more committed. Michael, if you'll get the writing declaration ready. Some of you saw this already posted on our group and read it and kind of signed it, but you didn't really know what you were signing because, it's one thing to say, yeah, I'm going to write this book. You didn't know what your book was, and you didn't know how many pages you would have to write per week in order to do it. So Michael's going to read it to you, and then I'm going to invite you to print it out at your house, sign it in pen, put it on your refrigerator. Maybe some of you want to post it on Facebook. Get a witness, get somebody to witness you actually signing this contract so that it is real for you. And as Chris Beatty, the author of the contract, said, tailor, make it your own, rewrite it if you need, personalize it. But the idea here is to give yourself permission to write a shitty first draft, because that's what we're all about, is about the completion of the quantity we commit to and leaving the quality up for later. Michael.
Yes. This is my outrageous writing declaration. I hereby pledge my intent to complete a 75,000 word manuscript by July 15th.
Or enter your own word count. Keep going.
By invoking an absurd deadlines on such an enormous undertaking. I understand that notions of craft, brilliance, and competency are to be chucked right out the window, where they will remain, ignored until they are retrieved for the editing process. I understand that I am a talented person capable of heroic acts of creativity, and I will give myself enough time over the course of the next month to allow my innate gifts to come to the surface, unmolested by self-doubt, self-criticism, and other acts of self-bullying. During the months ahead, I realize I will produce clunky dialogue, cliched characters, and deeply flawed plots. I agree that all of these things will be left in my rough draft to be corrected and or excised at a later point. I understand my right to withhold my manuscript from all readers until I deem it completed. I also acknowledge my rights as author to substantially inflate both the quality of the rough draft and the rigors of the writing process, should such inflation prove useful in garnering me respect and attention, or freedom from participation in onerous household chores. I acknowledge that the deadline I set for myself is absolute and unchangeable, and that any failure to meet the deadline or any effort on my part to move the deadline once the adventure has begun will invite well-deserved mockery from friends and family. I also acknowledge that upon successful completion of the stated writing objective, I am entitled to a period of gleeful celebration and revelry, the duration and intensity of which may preclude me from participating fully in workplace activities for days, if not weeks, afterwards. Reality is a crutch for those who are unable to handle fantasy. And this is the date and signature, Michael McClure.
Beautiful, Michael. Thank you. Okay, so Chris Beatty obviously is a fiction writer. And for those of us who are writing how-to, self-help, memoirs, you may want to adjust it a little bit, make it your own. But the important elements here, in addition to letting go of notions of perfectionism, is also, you know, like, hey, you really want to nourish yourself, be resourced, you know, really be able to show up for the task at hand. And then that may mean, you know, lightening up on things like housework or letting go of certain things because, hey, I've got an excuse. I'm writing a book, and you're going to tell friends and family that you're writing a book. And it also means that you want to really have a kind of a consequence. So he talked about mockery or, you know, being humiliated for not doing it. There are also other writing coaches who say, hey, make a commitment to, you know, I made a commitment to donate more money to the No Kid Hungry Fund in the event that I don't, you know, obviously we collectively gathered $3,000 and gave it to No Kid Hungry just to start this. And I'm going to invite you that if you don't finish your manuscript by the time that you make another donation as a way of saying, ooh, this is a consequence that cost me. So I personally made that commitment. But for some people, it's donating or, you know, taking someone else out or doing something that's painful for you as a consequence. And then ultimately also the importance of really allowing yourself to celebrate. When you're done with this after July 15th, you really want to give yourself like time to be like, what am I going to do? I'm going to go out to dinner, get my favorite meal. I'm going to throw a party. I'm going to, you know, what is it that like go on a trip, something that really feels like I'm celebrating me for becoming an author, having finished this manuscript. So those are the elements that I want us to undertake on this threshold where we enter the actual writing process. And our accountability partners is an important formula in that. So we're gonna meet with them. Michael's gonna post new accountability buddies, which is fun, keeps it fun to mix and match and get new perspectives. I do recommend, if you haven't already posted online that you're doing your book, today or this week would be a great time to make that public declaration. And one more piece, which is going to be a homework assignment, is to rehearse your elevator speech. So on class 1, we all talked about like the problem that the book solves and how the book solves it in a brief, like 30-second, 90-second elevator speech. But not just as an exercise in this class, you are now needing more reflections as you re-sequence your identity as an author. You want to change your cocktail conversation. You want to tell more people. You want to be practicing that speech, because that speech it's not like, ooh, I'm looking for an agent. I'm looking, you know, it's not like a marketing kind of thing. It's more of a, this is my inner world. So much of my time and energy, 10 hours every week is going into this. I want to be able to communicate it with the outside world with enthusiasm. And we want to be careful, because when we start talking about something that's very near and dear and precious to us, we could be like oversensitive. Like, what do people think of it? What do they think of me? And the key here is to keep our ego out of it, but to keep our heart and soul in the conversation. And when you talk about your book, I invite you to be like a pregnant parent, which is with the tenderness and the love and the adoration and the enthusiasm that you have for the coming, you know, child. And so when you talk about it, it's not letting anybody tell you, oh, that's an ugly kid, or you're never gonna have the baby. Like anybody who says anything that's disparaging towards your child, you know, what I do is I get fierce. You want to be very protective as a parent about your baby. And so invite people around you to be in the enthusiastic conversation about it as well. And sometimes it takes educating our friends and family about how they can support us in it, because it's a very tender thing. And as we all know, when somebody is pregnant, they need extra support. It does take a village. It takes a tenderness. And you deserve it because you're a messenger for something for the future. So that's the final homework assignment, really, you know, in addition to writing, you know, doing your formula so you know how many words, then starting and writing that page count. I want you to sign the outrageous contract, and I want you to practice your elevator speech and contact your accountability buddy. And that is your homework for the next 2 weeks. And I will have, you know, another audio next week, probably to keep us in the flow. But I'm curious if there's any closing questions as we wrap up. I see Jim. Anyone else? Okay, Jim.
Yeah, just where is that template located in the Facebook group? Is it buried down in the thread somewhere? I couldn't find it in the files.
Sure. So it is in the files, and I did just tag Michael in it, so it'll probably circle right back up to the top. Okay. And anybody who finds it, just tag Jim so he can find it as well.
Because I'm old.
Well, you probably have the math piece over most of us. So I was thinking, I'm like, usually I have a group who's really anti-math when I start breaking out the formulas. And I was like, maybe I should call on Jim to help us with that one. I saw another hand. It was Alexandra.
Yeah, hi. So I already started on Sunday and I went through one chapter, and my question is, because I tend to stick to we're doing 5 minutes, I'm doing that. But then I notice sometimes it's like it really starts flowing just by the end of it, and then I want to write more. So it's like, what do I do with that?
Yeah, excellent. This is a really good question, because this is going to happen to everybody. And this week, and I love that you finished your, I'm celebrating that you finished your whole blueprint. I'm celebrating how good you are at, hey, I'm going to learn the form and then I'll break the rules and change them later. So the proper form is to stop at 5 minutes. And then when the mind's like, oh, I have more to write, that dissonance is actually valuable for the motivation to write the next chunk. It's actually valuable for your word concision. That discomfort that I have more to write than 5 minutes will re-sequence you as a writer to actually write. If you value it, if you keep breaking it and extending it, you get leaky. You start breaking it and extending it and mushering them out. And later, when you really have a muscle built, you'll know whether it's worth, ooh, I need to write this or not. But when you're training, you think about it like this, just like, okay, I'm doing these drills, these 5 minute drills. And then later you can come back and fill in the holes that you wanted to write more about. But I'll tell you this, the process that evolves, since this is also your first blueprint, it could be that the questions you're asking are much bigger than what can be answered in 5 minutes. So as you do the 5 minute chunks, you'll learn to adjust your questions to be actually something that you can answer in 5 minutes. You'll learn to adjust. And you may even come next week, I'm going to suggest, to the process of, here's my question. Hold on. I was going to give you an actual question, but I won't worry about it. I'll say, here's my question, my power words. I write for 5 minutes, the timer goes off, and in that moment, I stop.
Oh, he's a good one. Come here, Bean.
hold on. I then, hold on a second. I'm just trying to,
Love that.
somebody's on
Stop.
mute.
Sit. Sit.
Somebody's training their dog.
It's
You can use
Brianna.
everyone if you want.
Okay,
Sit,
here we go. When I consider, ooh, I've got more to write, I have almost answered the question, but there's still this other thing. Then what, instead of just keep writing, then I'll discipline myself to write a question with what else I have to say. What's the point of what I still, so I'm going back into my planning mind and I think, what is it that needs to be said here for the reader's benefit? I write a new question for the piece that hasn't been answered, come up with 5 colorful words, and then I set the timer and do 5 more minutes on it. So instead of just leaking out into the pattern of writing what I want to write when I want to write it because I'm in the flow, I might pause, gather myself, kind of have some counsel with a greater like design, and then get back in the flow. This is, you know, it's an advanced practice, but it is worth considering for you who has a full blueprint. Obviously, blueprinting works for you, and I'm going to invite you to consider that as a way to handle it. But go this first week with as much flow as possible, and then reverse engineer it. Good. So that's kind of like an advanced answer, but I'm excited to hear how it goes for you.
I have a very quick question. Are we now doing only videos and we're not in the links that you originally shared?
So when I do a video, it replaces the original links. And I can't promise, you know, what's to come. You've got the whole course available as a self-study. And I know that I will show up every 2 weeks, and then I'll let you know if there's more than that. Okay, thank you. Other questions I'm reading is...
I had one more.
Uh-huh, good. Alexandra. Okay, so...
So I made...
Pause for a moment, Alexandra. Michael, are you with me? Did I lose him? There you are. Can you read the chat and let me know if there's any questions in the chat that I missed, so that after Alexandra, I'll see if you can ask that question for me. Go ahead.
So there's a string just about people getting clarification that we're writing in 5-minute chunks.
Okay.
And
I'll answer after Alexandra. So let me finish that. I can't do 2 things at once. So if you'll support me in a moment. Alexandra, go ahead.
Okay, so maybe I made a mistake of like reading what I already wrote so that I actually knew I know what's written, so then I can continue. But maybe it was a mistake because then I was like, whoa, this is like all over the place, and like then the judgment started.
Yes.
But I don't know, is that like, should I totally avoid reading anything I wrote and
yes.
just like go to the point?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So if we are going to make it, like if I'm going to write 33 pages, what's your weekly target, by the way? How many pages this week are you?
26 pages.
Okay. So 26. I want you to write 26 pages this week. And I don't want you to write for 5 minutes, reread what you wrote, consider how to write that differently, and then do like, I understand that our old way of writing is iteratively, where we write and then we read and then we consider. That's the old way of writing. For this week, this full week, because we're still in the training ground, I want you to write for 5-minute chunks. So this may answer Michael the question. Let me know if I don't answer it. You write for 5 minutes, and then you take a breath and you read the next question. You consider your power words, you write for 5 minutes, and you let it go, just as we did at the beginning of this class when I did the exercise. I didn't say to everyone, oh, you just wrote for 5 minutes. Let's go around the circle and read to each other. How was it? It's not about that. It's about darkening the page, literally pouring the content out, putting the clay on the wheel, 5-minute little deadlines is the fastest way to pour our creativity out. And then later what you'll find is when it's time to rewrite and you read, your critical mind will say, ooh, there's more I could say, or there's holes, or I could cut this. And that's all a different part of the brain. We'll leave that for later. This is white hot writing. Yeah. Michael, did I answer the questions in the chats?
Thank you.
Great.
The only one was kind of a reiteration of the question that I asked about if I don't have my points and don't have questions for the points yet, should I work on those points, or should I write? And you can answer that, but.
Yeah, so if you don't have points at all, it may be that the points didn't work for you. Like I really trust that you got what you needed for the last 3 weeks of this work. And maybe it was just the emotional process you needed to get in the right mindset to write 20 pages a week or 50 pages a week. So I fully celebrate my writers who end up throwing the blueprinting process out because that's not their nature. Don't go backwards now and try to be a good student and do all the homework. It's like, the train is moving, you're on it. Don't fall off the train, just start writing. Good. Okay, so that answers Linda's point about how she doesn't have her questions yet, and sounds like we're so Dave, you have a question?
So I understand, I think in a meta way, what you're saying, and it's really huge. Until now, I had no idea how detailed you were getting, that we were just doing 5-minute deadlines, and we're doing this from a question with the 3 power words as a guide. So now I get, and it's awesome. I didn't know you were doing this until now. I also know that without a question, there is no guidance. So I know for myself, I'm not going to just write for 5 minutes unless I have a question. So maybe I have to take 2 minutes to get a question. But I'm not going to wing it because I understand how the meta of what you're doing drives all of this. Wish I would have known this a long time ago. My 5 other books would have been written way faster.
No, I hear that so often. Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, it's very powerful, and I'm glad that you got it. And there's some people who can conceptually get it, and yet the way they need to write is to just fucking flow. And to stop and ask a question, for some people, as much as I get it and you get it, writing is a spiritual practice. And I genuinely want to say to everyone on the call that you're the inner authority of that spiritual practice. And I'm delighted and honored to be your guide and to share with you tools and tips that I know work for me and, hundreds of other people. But I ultimately at this point need you to get out of your way around doing it right or doing it wrong, and play the game we're playing, which is how many pages can you write your target number of pages per week by any and all means. And I mean that. There are, most writers in the world don't ask themselves a question before writing. So by any and all means, can you write those pages? If you have a blueprint or a question, more power to you, but don't let that get in your way. Your new commitment is page count and word count. Good. Okay, so that answers your question as well, Linda. I'm speaking to the same issue with Dave. Feels like we're in a good place to wrap up. And if you do have more questions, I'll be on Facebook. Looking forward to it. The final word that I have as an inspiration to you all is to tend to your vibe, to really notice your state. There's an old habit of writing from stress and pressure, and we want to shift that so that writing actually comes from like joy and passion. And if you're noticing, you're like, oh, I feel low energy and I'm coming to my pages, as opposed to being like, oh, I'll just wait for the inspiration and then I'll write. It's like your job to actually like go, okay, I need to move my Kundalini, raise my vibration, show up. Like it's an inner job to get into the state and then flow. And whether that's through movement, through breath, through sound, through prayer, through meditation, like that's up to you. But channeling this many pages per week really is a spiritual discipline. And my invitation to you is to see those pages flowing through, to visualize an open channel. And, you know, in the morning when you wake up, get excited about the number of pages you're writing that day. In the evening when you go to bed, get excited about how many pages you have written, how many you will write. And even if you show up in 2 weeks from now and you've written 2 pages, that's something to celebrate. Okay, so we're in this unconditional celebration of everything that's created. And just as you're throwing away the self-doubt and self-criticism, you know, also throw away the part of you that likes to beat yourself up, because we will write best if we're motivated and inspired and without pressure. So I look forward to hearing about your celebrations, your passion, your enthusiasm for writing. Blessings until next time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fun. Bye. Come on.